Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we've got an absolutely fascinating journey ahead of us. We're going to be exploring some of the most profound early Christian and patristic insights into the Annunciation. Together, we'll unpack these ancient texts to see exactly how the early church fathers understood Mary's unique role, her inner spiritual posture, and how she quite literally helped unlock a divine mystery that changed the entire cosmos. I mean, think about it for a second. How did one single conversation bridge the massive gap between heaven and earth? It's pretty incredible when you really stop and consider it. A single dialogue between a young woman and an archangel completely and forever changed humanity's relationship with the divine. It wasn't just some simple everyday greeting, right? It was a cosmic summit meeting that finally brought peace to a fractured world. Okay, let's dive into this. If you take a look at the screen, we have this beautiful traditional Coptic depiction of Archangel Gabriel and Saint Mary. This really sets the visual and historical scene for our theological journey today. Notice the posture of the two figures. You have Gabriel descending as this brilliant messenger of light, and Mary standing there in a posture of reverent, attentive prayer. According to the early fathers, like Saint Jacob of Serugh, it was precisely in this limpid, simple state of prayer that Mary was actually ready to receive such an earth-shattering revelation. So let's move into part one. A new era begins. To truly grasp the weight of this event, we have to recognize that this moment marked the beginning of an entirely new era. We're shifting away from the ancient prophecies and symbols of the Old Testament straight into the direct, concrete reality of the Incarnation. And this brings up a massive shift for believers. First, the Annunciation meant the end of the cosmic enmity between heaven and earth. Before this, humanity was separated from the Creator by this vast gulf. Second, as St. Augustine pointed out, we no longer have to search for God outside of ourselves, like in nature or philosophy, because God chose to actually dwell within. And finally, it provided the recovery of humanity's lost image. It opened up a true path of reconciliation that had literally been closed off since the dawn of humanity.
That brings us to section 2, Eve and the New Eve.
To really appreciate the brilliant light of the Annunciation, we kind of have to look back at a much darker, more dramatic moment in human history, which is Eden. And this brilliantly illustrates what the early church fathers called the Great Reversal, or the concept of the two mothers. Look at the stark contrast here on the slide. On one side, we have Eve. Her story is marked by disobedience, hiding among the trees in shame, and bringing this massive debt to humanity. But then, on the other side, we have Mary, who is characterized by active obedience. St. Jacob of Serugh poetically describes her as the daughter who wove a garment of glory for her father Adam, covering his nakedness and at last paying off that ancient debt. But the contrast doesn't just stop with the women themselves. It extends right to the messengers who approach them. The early fathers built incredible narrative tension around this parallel. Just think about the serpent in Eden for a moment. Hissing deceit, spreading death and enmity, literally pouring out evil counsel onto Eve. Now, compare that to Archangel Gabriel. He descends with absolute truth, proclaims life and profound peace, and implants salvation right into Mary's ear. Where the serpent didn't even offer a basic greeting of peace, Gabriel begins with, "Rejoice." St. Irenaeus captures this whole dynamic perfectly. He wrote, "While Eve disobeyed God, Mary obeyed him, so that the Virgin Mary would become the advocate of the Virgin Eve." This is such a powerful patristic view. It shows us that Mary's active, questioning faith directly reversed Eve's passive acceptance of the serpent's lies. Mary wasn't just some quiet bystander here. She was the active advocate stepping in to literally rewrite humanity's story. Let's look at section 3. Unveiling the divine mystery. Now we're getting into the absolute heart of our explainer today. Let's analyze Mary's bold, profound dialogue with Archangel Gabriel. Because this isn't just a simple Q&A. It is the actual unveiling of a divine mystery. When Gabriel delivers his astonishing news, Mary responds with a really profound question. How can this be, since I do not know a man? The early fathers were incredibly careful to point out that this was not a question of stubborn doubt. When Zechariah questioned the angel about his wife Elizabeth, he was silenced because he asked out of skepticism. Mary, on the other hand, made a necessary, humble inquiry. She needed to know how this miraculous event would happen, precisely so the divine mystery could be revealed and explained to the rest of the world. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how St. Jacob of Serugh views her question. He brings this incredible perspective, saying, "By that question, the wise one became the mouth of the church. She learned that interpretation for all creation." By having the courage and the profound inner spiritual beauty to respectfully converse with an archangel, Mary's inquiry successfully unlocked the theological explanation of the Incarnation for both humans and angels. She effectively became the voice for all of us. Just look at how Gabriel responds here. The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the highest will overshadow you. That answer is the direct result of her inquiry. This conversation acts as the literal key to our theological knowledge. Her dialogue encourages us on the correct path to understanding divine mysteries. It shows us that reverent inquiry, when it's driven by love and humility, is how we actually grow in divine knowledge. Moving into Section 4, the power of humility. So this naturally leads us to ask a pretty big question. Out of all the people in human history, why was Mary chosen for this unprecedented cosmic role? To understand that, we have to look closely at her inner spiritual posture. The early church fathers are completely unanimous on this point. The secret to her greatness is her profound humility and her free will. It is absolutely crucial to establish that God didn't force this upon her as if she were just a machine. He doesn't override human freedom. He chose her specifically because she was beautifully adorned with ultimate humility, and she willingly offered her complete obedience. Let's detail exactly why she was chosen, based on these patristic insights. First, her unmatched inner spiritual beauty. Second, the perfection of her righteous free will. God profoundly loves the spiritual beauty that comes from a willing, unforced heart. Third, she possessed the deepest humility on earth. In fact, the fathers note that if there had been anyone humbler, God would have chosen them instead. And fourth, her utter purity from worldly vanity. She preserved her human nature with a will that entirely tended toward the good. Saint Jacob of Serugh beautifully reinforces this exact idea, stating, "He looked on her humility and her gentleness and her purity and dwelt in her because it is easy for him to dwell with the humble." This anchors a major theme in early Christian thought, which is that humility is the ultimate way one draws near to God. It was Mary's sheer lowliness and purity that made her the perfect, flawless vessel for the creator of the universe to take on human flesh. And finally, Section 5, the patristic vision. The early church fathers didn't just write dry academic theology about Mary's role. They used incredibly rich poetic imagery to describe her unique place in the cosmos. These vibrant Syriac metaphors paint an unforgettable visual picture. They called her the second heaven because the Lord of heaven actually dwelt within her. She was a ship bearing heavenly treasure, pouring out riches on our destitute earth, a good field that bore fruit without seeds, the fair palace of the king, and even a heavenly chariot bearing the mighty one. These titles convey her unmatched cosmic and theological significance in a way that simple textbook definitions rarely can. So the crucial point is this: what St. Mary's earned is actually an asset for your own account. The early fathers emphasized that her joy, her grace, and her unique role serve as a direct invitation for our own lives today. Because she opened the door, you too are now called to carry God in your heart. You are called to become a temple of God and a dwelling place for the Holy Spirit, modeled exactly after her perfect example of faith. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative question to consider today. Will you cultivate the inner humility needed to become a dwelling place for the divine? God chose to dwell where there was unmatched humility, gentleness, and a willing heart. Mary's incredible example challenges every single one of us to look inward and prepare our own hearts. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into these profound early church mysteries. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.